Welcome, and thank you for joining us for Turning Data into Dollars, How to Improve Your Business with Operational Insight. This webinar is being hosted by Mobi, a BSM technologies company, which specializes in location-based services and analytics. The purpose of today's presentation will be to introduce BSM's customers involved in the service industry, as well as government, construction, and rail, to Mobi's business intelligence engine called Insight. Your speaker will be Greg Gray. Mr. Gray leads sales for Mobi's portfolio of products and has over 25 years of experience helping organizations achieve supply chain and logistics routing and scheduling efficiencies. Please note that the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. At the end of the presentation, we will answer as many questions as time will permit. Also note this call is being recorded. And with that, I'll turn it over to Greg.
Thank you, and thanks for joining. Today we're going to talk about the Mobi Insight tool, which is a powerful analytics product that helps provide field insight to improve operations. Before we dive into the product, I'd like to start by giving you some context and talking a little bit briefly about the Mobi product set, and so you see how it fits into the overall suite of products that we have. This is a screen that shows all of the different products that Mobi offers in the scheduling and routing and dispatch arena, and we've in this particular view we have them divided up into the time horizon that those products would fit within a company's field service process. So the upper left-hand corner, we have long-range planning tools. Below that we have the day of tools, things like dispatch and your routing and sequencing and all those things. And then on the right-hand side, really we've designed tools and analytics that help our customers who may be using today Mobi optimization tools, our routing and scheduling, or even someone else's. And more specifically, in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see that we have the Mobi Insight tool. And really what that tool is designed for is to help customers, existing BSM customers who are using one of our platforms, or any other client using a third-party GPS solution. But it takes that information, that core GPS information that's typically being used by a company internally for fleet information. So how's my asset performing? Is it speeding, idling, et cetera, safety and security type of things, and gives a whole new dimension and value to a company's ability to improve their operations. Because by taking that information along with your points of interest, or all of the customer locations and depots and warehouses and places where our folks have to go every day to do their work, we can correlate that information along with cost models to then show very valuable business metrics for the field service managers, the VP of service or VP of ops, all the way up into the CFO, CEO view. And so we're going to today spend our time inside of the Mobi Insight tool and really talk through some of the key metrics that would potentially be useful for your business, and then also provide some use cases as to how our existing customers today are seeing huge value and benefit from using the Mobi Insight tool. So with that, I would like to go to the actual product itself. So again, the Mobi Insight tool helps us understand what has happened in the field from yesterday back in time. So again, the GPS feeds will flow into us every day. We correlate all that information against the cost models. And then when you come in the morning and you log in, what I'm going to show is, depending on the role you have in the company, what view and metrics are you seeing given your role? And so the first thing that we're going to look at today is, I'm a senior executive within a service and delivery company. I have responsibility for multiple branches or divisions within my company. And when I log in, that's what I see. I see a rolled up view of all of the performance indicators from all of my technicians in the field in a holistic view, so I can compare how my branches and regions are performing against each other. One of the most powerful things about this Mobi Insight product is it's really focused on the KPIs that field service and delivery companies are measured against. The primary goal here is to help us understand how productive our people are in the field. That's one of the main overarching measurements that we care about. And then from there, part of that, what makes up the productive time is how much time are we spending at the customer site? Where are we going from the previous stop to the next stop? Is that a real customer stop? Is that a lunch visit? Is that a gas station? So all of those things, all of that information that we're getting from the GPS stops help us determine what we consider to be productive time. And by the way, the productive time is defined by you as the end customer. Some people, because they do have to make stops at depots, for example, to pick up equipment before they can go to the next customer, that stop would be considered productive, where in other cases, the technician would have all the inventory on their vehicle already, and so they would be expected to go from one customer to the next customer. So that's the main overarching visual that we have put in here. Just a note about the product itself. It's widget driven, which means all of these visualizations that you're seeing, these little boxes, those can be turned on and turned off and moved around on the screen. Because we have so many different metrics, I believe there's 22 KPIs in this product, not every customer needs to see all of those metrics. And certainly if you're focusing on improving field performance, you would want to understand the areas of low-hanging fruit so you could focus on those. So as part of the onboarding process, we work with you to identify which of those handful of metrics do you want to display and how you want it to be shown on the screen for each of the roles in your company to view. And again, so the snapshot here is it's a trending program. So again, we can certainly drill in and see what happened yesterday, but the goal here is to see over time, how are we performing against the goals we have as a company in the service and delivery space. And so to that end, we show you a 30-day snapshot of each of these goals. Now you can change those date ranges very easily, so you can look at extended periods. So again, the goal is to help you understand how you're performing now, but if you also want to compare how I was performing last quarter or against last year at the same time, that's easy to do. One of the other things as an executive looking at the screen, besides the high-level goals showing me the productivity metrics and how many stops per day are my folks doing, it's showing me important things like my cost per stop. This is something that in my experience has been very challenging for companies to understand. There's not an easy way for them typically to understand exactly what it's costing every day to make a stop. This can be very important to understand, especially if you have aggressive price contracts with large national customers, let's say a Walmart you're making deliveries to. If you'll notice down at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, we have a metric for high-cost customers. And what that's doing is it's measuring every time we stop at that customer within the 30-day period. And it's telling us how much it's costing us each time we make that stop, and how long we're staying there, and how long it took us to travel to that stop. This is really powerful because you can just, by looking at that, you can see what your cost per stop is, and if you know that your contract with Walmart, if the cost is less than you're paying to make the stop, that would be a strong indication that you should take a look at your existing route structure and see if there's ways to improve the performance of that route. Perhaps you take out some of their other stops and reorganize them in a way that allows you to drive that cost per stop down. So it's a very powerful tool. Again, just gives you a quick snapshot for that 30-day period of who's your most expensive visits. But it doesn't just do that. In addition, it's tracking every single stop that each one of our drivers or technicians is making, and we'll show that later on throughout the presentation, how you can see that. The other key piece of information is the level performance. That's to the bottom left-hand corner. What that would show us, depending on how your organization is structured, I mentioned this before, but you could have corporate, divisions, regions, branches, or some combination thereof. The system models that organizational structure, and so when you log in as an executive, you would see all of your regions and divisions and all of these color codings and how they compare with each other. But this is where I access and look at the key performance. So Shweta, if you click on the view more of the level performance, it will give you an idea of the breadth of KPIs that we're actually tracking here. and how relevant it would be for your organization to know and understand that information. A lot of times, there are certain metrics around the number of visits that we want our technicians to do or deliveries to make every day. That is a goal that we can put into the system, and you may in your organization have different types of workers. So an example would be, let's say, the cable industry. They would have a set of technicians that would do installations, which would be, they wouldn't do as many as a service technician who would maybe do 4 or 5 stops more per day than an install tech. So we measure those different groups of technicians, and then we can set goals about how many stops per day they're making. Along with that, we can understand some important information. One of the biggest areas we see of lost productivity in companies is if your folks start from a branch location, oftentimes they'll come in, maybe they're having their trucks loaded with inventory or they're having meetings. Typically that time for them to actually get on the road from the branch to go see the first customer can take somewhere between an hour and 2 hours, depending on how often they stop for coffee and they talk with their peers. And so that's a big challenge. If we can compress that time that they're in the branch before they get out, that obviously improves our productivity and gives us the ability to do more stops per day. And so one of the things that we track for you is when did they first turn the vehicle on, which is important so that we make sure if they're supposed to work starting at 8 that they're actually in the vehicle at 8. But the other more important metric is when did they actually arrive at the first customer stop. So even if they turned their car on at 8 but they didn't arrive at the customer until 10, there's a 2-hour window there of lost productivity. That knowing that information and seeing which of the field workers are violating your process of getting started on time can save you a lot of capacity and give you the ability to increase your revenues. So that's an important metric. Another one that we found within our customer base that's using the Insight tool today is how frequently they come back to the branch location. We have one very large customer who had a business rule. They wanted the techs to come in on Mondays, have a meeting, load up their vehicles for the week, and then come back the following Monday. And when we first turned on the Insight tool and measured several weeks of data, we started to see that the vehicles were coming back to the branch location 3 times per week for an average of an hour each time. And so they started looking at that, and they did a quality project. Why is this happening? They traced it back to poor inventory logistics management and fixed that problem. And once they did, they came back to us and said, just fixing that one metric and having that visibility into that business process, we saved 340,000 man hours going forward every year, which is a huge, huge amount of capacity that was being lost just because of a broken process internally. So again, those are some of the ways that our customers use this. But I think, again, the primary way that we think about this in helping our customers understand it is it helps us know what it's really costing us to make each of our stops, whether it's a delivery or a service that we're offering. It helps us understand how productive our people are in the field. That's the other thing that I've seen just working with many companies in the service and delivery space is that one of their biggest challenges is understanding how to forecast how many people I need in the field to serve my customers. And part of that's because there's not good information that's readily available to help them understand how productive you currently are so that you could create a model that would help you with your staffing needs. And so just one last point on this before we go to the next view is, as I mentioned, you would not have to look at all of these metrics if you decide to take advantage of the Insight tool in your own business. We would just pick those metrics that you would care about, and we would hide the rest, and that's how we would drive it forward. Okay, so that's kind of the view if I'm a senior level person just kind of wanting to get a feel for how the overall organization is doing every day and how they compare against each other. Now I would like to go into a view as if I were a service manager or a branch manager. And you'll notice there are some different visualizations here than you saw in the previous example. One of the first things that you'll see is that we have map on the upper left-hand corner. That's a heat map. And what's really powerful about that heat map for a branch manager is this is going to show me all of the stops, my customer density, where I made stops over the last 30-day period. The little yellow house in the middle, that represents our branch location. And so I can see, just by quickly looking at it, that I have a heavy concentration of customers around the radius of my branch. But you can notice both in the top left-hand corner and the bottom right-hand corner, my technicians made some stops that were far away from my branch location. So what that means is it probably drove my productivity level down because there was a lot of drive time. Just by looking at this, you can tell the distance is quite far. But also, there's not a high concentration of customers in those outlying areas, so I could only do 1 or 2 stops, and then I had to come back into the main area where my customers are. So that would, as a branch manager, I would look at that and wonder if I was a national company, perhaps there's a branch nearby that we could assign those folks to that would have less drive time so that they could be more productive and service those customers well, and allow me to free up my capacity to focus on the customers that are in my central core area to my branch. That's one way to look at it. If you didn't have that capacity, then the other option could be perhaps marketing could start campaigning in those areas so that we could build up more customers and have it'd be more productive to send a technician out there and work multiple jobs in a day. So he may have an initial long drive time, but at least he's able to knock out a bunch of customers before he has to come back to the branch location. So again, just a powerful visual tool of relative to where my branch location is today, where are my customers? This also helps a lot of our customers as their leases are coming up on their branch locations. If they've seen a shift in demographics about where their customers are moving to, this helps them get a good feel for where in the area those customers are starting to move to and where we're servicing them so that we can help them figure out where an ideal branch location would be to service that customer set. Okay, so that's the heat map tool. And again, I'm a branch manager. You'll notice the goals progress is the same. The difference is that I'm looking at my own data, the people that I'm responsible for, that branch or set of branches that I'm responsible for, not the whole company. So that's how I'm performing over a 30-day snapshot and over last quarter and year to date. And my productivity is related to my folks. And then when you get down to the bottom, you'll see there's another visualization that's different. You'll see a Gantt chart to the right. The Gantt chart helps me as a service manager. During the fog of war during a day, it's very difficult for a branch manager to really be thinking about every single technician I have, which stops they're making. And so what we do here is we present, these are the stops they made yesterday, so that we can quickly align those with our technicians on the left-hand side of the screen to see, how they performed, how many stops did they do we see anything out of the ordinary. The white stops indicate kind of unknown. What we're looking for really is green stops. Green have been correlated by our system to actual customer locations. Blue is branch. So, there's some ways that we can investigate those. And then on the left-hand side under driver performance, much like we showed in the overall executive view, this gives us a snapshot of each of our technicians that we're responsible for. And we're color coding them against the goals that we've set in the Insight system. So if they have white space where the goal is, that means that they're within the tolerance of the target we've set, whether it's number of visits per day or time on site with the customer. If they're in the green, that means they're performing better than we had expected as our goal. And obviously red means they're performing less than the goal. And so, again, quick snapshot. I'm running a branch. I have a million things to do. I'm crazy busy. This helps me just immediately have my finger on the pulse. And it's really like they're in the vehicle with each of these technicians or drivers every day because of this valuable information that's being correlated from the existing GPS solution that you have from BSM today. And we can expand that, so to expand the driver performance, we'll just take a quick look at that. Any of these metrics, by the way, that we see, we can export all of that information. So we have some customers who like to view it on the screen, and it's a very powerful tool for branch managers and service managers to use these visualizations as they talk to their drivers and technicians as ways to improve their performance. They can show them a visual is very powerful, but it can also be if you have a set of tools or reports that you're using in your company to run your business, you can simply pull these pieces of data from our data warehouse, or you can export them from the tool and add them to your playbook execution dashboards that you may be using internally. So again, with this view as a branch manager, I can focus on any of these categories. And if I wanted to look at, my customers' visits per day, I can click on that header, and it'll pull up a box of all of the visits per day across a period of time. So I can really drill into all the detail and see a snapshot, because everybody has a bad day. So if your driver had a bad day one day, that doesn't necessarily mean that his performance is awful and he should be fired. What you're looking for is over time, are they improving, or at least if they're already good out of the gate, that they're staying at that higher level of performance that you expect. And you're looking for those outliers that are, not following process, where we see a lot of red and trending in the wrong direction. And again, that would indicate we need to have some sessions with that person to try to improve their performance or make a change in the organization and improve. So that's the branch manager's view. At that point, the other thing that the branch manager can do that's really valuable is he can actually drill in to an individual technician. And I think if we looked at, let's say, George Burns, we see some red in George Burns' driver performance. We'll actually go to his specific scorecard. And what we'll find, we can try to do some investigation to understand what's happening here. We see that he has pretty low levels of productivity, although his customer duration times or on-site times are good. But here we can see he just hasn't completed as many jobs as we would like him to. He has a lot of unknown stops. And so we could certainly click on one of those unknowns, and it would bring up a route sheet for that particular day, and we can start to look at, where was he going? As you would expect with any mapping tool, you can look at this in satellite view, et cetera. But here it's nice because you can see these different stops. You can click on the stop, and it will tell you, whatever location we were able to glean from the GPS information that was passed to us. And again, this type of information is very difficult to get in running a service and delivery business today without having a tool like Insight to help you understand that. The other nice thing we can see about each of our technicians is, again, the cost per stop they have. So when we look at overall, how are our routes performing, I think of this tool as a way to kind of bridge what the corporate office thinks is happening in the field with the reality of what's really happening. And oftentimes the branch folks are just trying to get the work done, and they generally are not over capacity, or under capacity, so they don't have resources to really sit around and look at a lot of data. And so they have differing views on why things happen the way they do in the field versus the corporate office. This really becomes the control tower. As I mentioned before, it's like you're in the vehicle with the driver, but it also helps to get everybody on the same page, because this is the source of truth. This is what's really happening in the field. This is how much it's costing us to run our operations in the field. And it also helps us to identify low-hanging fruit where we have a lot of opportunity to improve. On that note, it doesn't require huge amounts of process change to use Mobi Insight. That's the great thing about it. Oftentimes when you look at tools that can improve your performance in the field, whether it's a mobile application or even routing and scheduling, it can take longer to deploy those tools, and you have a lot of people to train. And while they're very valuable, it just takes a lot of time. With the Mobi Insight tool, it's pre-integrated to BSM platforms already. So as an existing customer, we literally can turn it on instantly, ask a few questions to make sure we get the cost models right around the vehicles and the people, and you'll start to get value immediately. And I think that's really important because you don't have to train a ton of people in your organization. Think of this as a way to instantly know how you're performing, find, either confirm suspicions you have about your ability to be, as efficient as possible, or if you think you have problem areas, this is the tool that will tell you that instantly. And that's really the starting point that we use at Mobi for most of our customers because, again, it helps everybody understand where should we be spending our time on improving. And it can be different for each person. As I mentioned, one of the low-hanging fruit items that we saw with one of our biggest customers was the fact that the people were coming back to the branch more than one time a week. I mean, 340,000 hours of lost productive time is a massive amount of lost revenue. So that was obviously really important for them to fix initially. And then from there, they went on to other things like durations of the customers, how much are we spending per stop versus what we think we should be spending, and those types of things. So that's why we're excited to be here today to talk about this, is we think for those of you who are already using BSM platform, this is a natural extension because it makes the existing platform even more powerful to the rest of your organization by giving the business users this information that they need to make better field decisions. So just to recap a few key items about the Mobi Insight tool. It's designed to show you yesterday back in time. It's a trending tool. It can be leveraged in different ways within the organization. It can be configured to only show the things that you care about as a company to look at initially and focus on. It's a web-based tool. Everything is hosted by Mobi and the BSM team. It's very transparent. It's easy to install and gain valuable information. And even for those of you who are existing BSM customers who've been using our GPS platforms for quite some time, it's possible for us to go back in time, instead of turning it on and waiting for 30 days to start to collect some trending information. Oftentimes we can just turn it on, go back in time, correlate that information historically, and give you a great baseline to start from of how you're performing. So the return on investment and time to value is compressed even further because now you're not waiting just to see what's happening. You get instant feedback from the data that you've already been collecting. And so that's very positive for our BSM customers. But again, I want to make the point that if you don't have a BSM platform today and you may have some other GPS product, it's entirely possible and easy for you to leverage the Mobi Insight tool on top of that existing GPS platform that you have today. So again, in summary, the roles within the Insight tool can be configured so that you have corporate views, you have branch views. Really, drivers don't interact directly with this product, that if you may be thinking about that. This is really designed for the folks that are inside the four walls of your business to make them feel like they're out in the field, but then to use that information, those visuals that we went through, the driver scorecard, the schedule for the day when we've noticed things where he didn't make as many stops, customer stops as we had hoped. It can also be used for training. You bring them in and show them that information. But it's also, we've seen within our existing customers that this information feeds into a lot of different departments that certainly would feed into the routing and scheduling and dispatch team, especially as we learn how long we're spending with customers. The durations are really critical for a number of reasons within a company. The first one is you have to understand how long it takes to do the work so that you can properly plan your workforce. How many people do I need to do the demand that's coming in my market? That's one thing. If you're using any routing optimization tools, it's vitally important that we have duration information by the type of work or delivery we're making in order for it to optimize your day and to give you the savings and the efficiencies that you expect or to show up on time. Those are key metrics. And so this tool will continue to work hand in hand with your existing routing and scheduling tools that you may have, or if in the future you use the Mobi Insight tool to see that you have challenges with scheduling your routes and making them as efficient as they could be, then that will help us feed information into the Mobi routing tools to be able to then optimize your routes for the day. So it really becomes, as I mentioned, I used the phrase control tower. It really is a control tower, and everybody can get on the same page quickly using this. And I think the key is as a customer, as you're sitting there thinking about technology, it's really one of the easiest things you can implement, given that it's pre-integrated into the BSM platform today. And again, the way that this would work, if you could imagine yourself wanting to try it and see the value for yourself, really the steps would be you would work with your sales rep, and we would get it enabled and turned on quickly. But really, there's a few questions that we would ask you. Some customers prefer to not start with any goals. They just want the system to collect the information so we can start to see our cost per stop. And the other thing is, if you have folks that start from home, for example, the other thing we're tracking is the commuting cost. That's really important because, again, one of the things I've seen from just my own experience, when people make that change in their business to let people start from home, they oftentimes haven't done any sort of scientific study around where their people live in relation to where their customers are. And we found this out. We have one customer who hired someone to do some work, but they lived one county over from where the customer base was that they were required to work on. And so that meant that every day that person had to drive 2 hours to get into the county and to get to a customer stop, and then they had to drive 2 hours back to get home in their 8-hour day. So not very efficient. Quickly saw that, made some changes in terms of their assignments, and then focused on hiring somebody in the area where that customer base was that needed serviced. But that's a really critical piece, because knowing how much it's really costing you to, not only in terms of lost productivity, or if the guy has to drive an hour to get to the first customer, that's probably not efficient, but it's also putting, extreme wear and tear on your vehicle. So it's not just that cost of the person not being there as soon as we would like, but you have add-on costs around more mileage, excessive mileage on your vehicles, more maintenance and repair. So there's a huge add-on effect if you're not as efficient as you could be. So again, we would ask that we would go through a list of goals. If you cared about those goals initially, we would help configure those quickly, and we would get some costs from you on the different vehicle types, their cost per mile, things like that, and kind of a standard cost for your people. And that's it. Once we have that information, the system's going to do its thing. It will optimize every night all of the GPS feed information that's coming in, correlate that with all the customer data that we have in your fuel and depot and warehouse stops, and present this information back to you. So every morning when you come in, it's all there, and you can use it to run your operations. So I think that's it in terms of the overview for the Mobi Insight tool. And again, I really think if you think about your business today, some of the metrics that we talked about, think about, is it easy for you today to know what it really costs you to make a stop? If you're struggling with on-time performance, if you're struggling with understanding how many people do we really need in the field, if you have a lower level of customer satisfaction than you had hoped to have, there's probably a lot of thoughts around why those things are happening, but just think, do you really have the detailed information that you need to understand what the root cause of some of these challenges might be, and how helpful it would be if you had a tool like Mobi Insight that you could look at that instantly and see what's happening in the field.
Hi, Greg. A few questions have come in through chat. The first question we have is, what size business does the solution make sense for?
Thanks, Travis. So Mobi has both SMB products and enterprise products. So I think our smallest customer using our tools has approximately 5 vehicles, and our largest is over 30,000.
Okay. The next question we have is, are the metrics you mentioned earlier one size fits all, or can they be reconfigured based on specific needs or business goals?
So the product, because it's designed with widgets, as I talked about earlier, we can hide some of the metrics because not every customer needs to see every single metric that the Insight tool offers. In addition, the Insight tool was designed to take in additional metrics by industry. So if you have some unique metrics that you didn't see in today's presentation that you feel would be very valuable to have included in the set of dashboards to help run your company, we absolutely would love to talk to you about integrating those into the Insight tool.
Okay, great. How easy is it to get up and running, and how long does it take?
Great questions. So today, if you're on one of the BSM platforms, we are already pre-integrated. So there's nothing that you have to do other than the process is to work with us initially just to gather some cost information on the vehicle types and some of the people costs that we talked about. And again, one of the benefits of being a BSM customer is if you're using our current platforms, we can potentially just take some of that historical data and put it into Insight right off the bat so that you'll have some trend information to look at rather than turning it on if you were a new customer and then waiting for, say, 2 weeks to a month to gather enough metrics to see some trends coming in. If you're not a current BSM customer or you have some other GPS product, we absolutely sit on top of those as well. That process would just take a little bit longer because we'd still have to collect data from, starting from day one. So you'd probably want at least 2 weeks to a month worth of data to really understand the trends and the value that the Insight tool can provide. But in either case, getting started is very easy and painless. And if you're a BSM customer, you can be up and running in using one of our platforms, you can be up and running in as little as a week. If you're using some other GPS product, it may take us 2 to 4 weeks, depending on which product it is and getting access to the feed.
Is there an additional service fee for technical support?
No. All of our support costs are rolled into the monthly fee that you pay for the Insight tool, which is based on a per vehicle per month subscription model.
All right, and the final question is, how is this different from any other BI or analytics tool that's already out there?
That's really a good question because everybody uses the terms BI or analytics, especially in the GPS space, and so it can be a bit confusing as a customer to understand, what does that really mean? In our world, when we look at all the GPS products out there and they talk about the BI tools and the analytics they provide, they are generally speaking about specific fleet metrics, how my asset is performing, right? Harsh braking, speeding, idling, those kinds of views and portals or fuel costs, things like that. What we're doing is providing a completely different dimension and view of that GPS information as it relates to the operating side of the house. So how my people that are operating that asset are performing. Are they going where they're supposed to go? What's it costing me to allow them to start from home and service customers? How long are they spending at each of my customers? Are they doing enough stops per day from a productivity perspective? So again, those are very common terms that can be confusing, but this is a very unique and different tool, and from that perspective of we're helping you to understand that performance in the field and the productivity levels versus how my vehicle is performing from an asset perspective.
Okay, Greg, thank you very much. That's all of them.
One thing I'd like to say, I guess, before we finish the call, Travis, for those of you who can see value in what we presented today, there is a lot of demand for this in the market and within our installed base customers because it is very unique. We haven't seen anyone out there offering this type of integrated view into field operations. There are many customers who have, obviously, BI tools that look at a lot of data, but struggle with being able to put together a relevant, comprehensive list of KPIs that matter. And so we're excited to present this to you today, and we would absolutely enjoy the opportunity to share the value with you. But we there's a prioritization approach for this, and so what we would ask is if you could fill out the survey afterwards. There are some key questions there that would help us kind of understand your business better to make sure that this is a good fit. In most cases, it will be. The Insight product is very broad. It works across almost every service and delivery company out there, but we want to make sure that we understand enough about your business to make sure that it would be a good fit before we ask you to invest your time and effort. And so with that, we would really appreciate it if you could fill that survey out that will come out afterwards.
And so that concludes today's webinar. Thank you to everyone for joining us. If anyone had a question that was not answered, please don't hesitate to reach out to either BSM Technologies or Greg directly. As well, don't forget to find out if you qualify for a consultation and pilot program of Mobi's business intelligence engine, Insight. There will be a survey to follow. Please submit your interest there, and you will be contacted. Also, everyone, to be aware that we will be continuing this series with another webinar scheduled for March 1st, where we will be discussing strategies for executing on business intelligence data and visualization through Mobi, specifically in regards to how to simplify long-range planning.